why does a movie from 1959 like The Lost World feel like you could just step right through the screen and walk around, while a modern blockbuster kind of feels like a plastic cutscene from an old PlayStation game? Now, I know what you're thinking. You're probably saying, well, it's just bad CGI, or maybe just terrible digital color grading. And yeah, sure, those technical elements definitely play a part, but the truth is actually way more fascinating. The real answer goes far beyond just bad visual effects. It's actually rooted in deep psychological mechanics and the whole philosophy of how we even perceive reality.
Section 1. Why modern movies feel fake.
When you put a 1959 classic up against something like 2023's Quantumania, the contrast is pretty jarring. Older films frequently relied on deep focus and wide shots. You can read the environment. You can see the textures of the dirt, the distant trees, the actual faces in the background. It gives you a real sense of a 3D place. But look at the modern standard. The modern cinematic look is totally obsessed with a shallow depth of field and endless medium close-ups. Sure, the subject is in focus, but the background? It's just this blurry, isolated, visually uninteresting sludge. This approach actively destroys our sense of 3D space, simply because it doesn't give our eyes anything to actually explore.
Section 2. Defining perceptual realism.
Okay, so the core concept we need to talk about here is perceptual realism. A movie doesn't need to be physically real to feel real to us. We all know movies are make-believe constructs, right? But we experience them as perceptually real when the image triggers the exact same psychological mechanisms our brains use to navigate the actual physical world around us every single day.
Film scholar Stephen Prince described this beautifully. He pointed out that perceptually realistic images display what he calls a nested hierarchy of cues: light, color, texture, movement. Just think about how you're looking at the real world right now. You naturally scan your environment. You look at details off in the distance, you check out the texture of a wall next to you. When a movie frame actually uses deep focus and gives us a wide, readable environment, it practically invites us to actively scan the frame for meaning, exactly like we do in ordinary life. And when we can do that, we become totally immersed in that constructed reality.
And this brilliantly shows that it's really a matter of form, not just content. Let's take Avatar, The Way of Water. I mean, that is a purely digital, fully computer-generated alien planet, yet it feels incredibly immersive. Why? Because James Cameron actually respects perceptual realism. He integrates his subjects right into their surroundings and offers these ridiculously rich, deep focus images. Even if you're only catching a glimpse of some alien plant in your peripheral vision, your brain is actively scanning that frame for 3D meaning. A world made of 100% CGI can be highly immersive, as long as the director respects how human beings naturally perceive space.
So if we can get incredible perceptual realism using purely CGI, well, that forces us to pivot and ask a pretty serious question. If digital cameras and CGI aren't inherently the real problem here, what is? We really have to rethink our basic assumptions about modern cinematic tech.
Section 3. The myth of the camera.
To really wrap our heads around this, we have to look at this philosophical concept called indexicality. Basically, an index is a sign that has a direct physical connection to whatever it represents, kind of like how a footprint in the sand is the physical index of a foot. Traditional celluloid film, that is highly indexical. Real light physically hit and chemically imprinted onto a piece of plastic. It has a direct causal link to reality. Digital sensors, though, they just convert light into data and digits. It's inherently mutable. You can change it on a whim. And because of this, a lot of purists will argue that digital just lacks authenticity, and that's why movies feel fake nowadays.
But here's the thing. As scholar David Davies points out, a viewer's literal immersion isn't actually affected by the indicadality of the camera at all. As an audience member, your brain doesn't subconsciously know if light was chemically etched onto film or if it was just converted to ones and zeros. So the crucial takeaway here is that it's not the physical camera technology that matters. It's the feeling of physicality in the final image that truly counts.
Section 4. The fix-it-in-post trap.
What's really killing immersion today is the studio pipeline, specifically this highly detrimental fix-it-in-post mentality. Here's how it usually goes. Step 1. Directors avoid making definitive lighting or environmental choices while actually on set. Step 2. Because they want to keep their options open for later, they shoot the footage as bland, boring, and flatly lit as humanly possible. And Step 3. They just manipulate the heck out of it in post-production. This modern workflow literally drains the soul and the life out of real locations before the editing process even starts.
And I've got the absolute perfect, tragic example for you. Remember the 2016 Assassin's Creed movie? They filmed a genuine, record-breaking free-fall stunt for that iconic leap of faith scene. It was a purely practical, incredible human achievement. But how did it actually look in the final movie? They ended up burying the poor stuntman in fake volumetric smoke and this digital brown sludge, making a genuine physical feat look like a highly compressed JPEG. This fix-it mentality completely ruined a totally practical moment and destroyed its realism. They took something profoundly real and manipulated it until it felt entirely fake.
Section 5. Haptic Visuality and Touch.
Which brings us to one of my absolute favorite concepts, haptic visuality. Haptic perception is all about tactile, physical touch. Film scholar Laura Marks argues that cinema is a deeply embodied experience, not just a purely visual one. Through haptic visuality, a great film engages our physical senses so intensely that our eyes literally start to function like organs of touch. We stop merely looking at the screen, and we actually start feeling it.
Marx notes that haptic looking tends to move over the surface of its object, more inclined to graze than to gaze. It's all about discerning texture rather than just plunging straight into visual depth. True immersion happens when we feel an undeniable visceral response. You know, when the details are so rich and so intentional that we feel like we can practically reach out and touch the wet pavement or feel the rough bark of a tree.
The true masters of cinema use very specific techniques to trigger these physical sensations in us. Directors like Paul Thomas Anderson, for example, will use extreme close-ups to let us obsessively study the intimate minutiae of an actor's face. Someone like Martin Scorsese incorporates terrifyingly tangible, practical elements, like the sheer kinetic force of a tidal wave in silence or a raging actual fire. And filmmakers will intentionally add physical texture to the image itself through thick film grain or digital noise. These tactile elements force a dynamic, two-way connection. The object on screen pushes back at you, it has a real feel to it, and it impresses itself upon you, the viewer.
Section 6. Rebuilding Cinematic Immersion.
Just compare how two different eras capture a tropical environment. In a 70s classic like Sorcerer, the sharp lighting heavily emphasizes the sweat, the grit, the imperfections on the actors' faces. It perfectly captures what philosophers call sensory qualia, that undeniable feeling of what it is like to be suffocating in inescapable humidity. Conversely, look at modern films like Jurassic World Rebirth. You've got actors surviving brutal dinosaur attacks, but they have pristine vanity makeup and perfectly matte skin. It just screams artificial, lacking the exact texture that makes a space undeniably real.
So, what should you take away from all this? Basically, cinema is an embodied experience. Deep immersion doesn't just happen by accident. It is created through a continuous loop of sensory dynamics. Ultimately, it all comes down to intentionality. Great filmmakers purposefully invite the audience to actively map out 3D spaces with their eyes and to explore the textures of a world exactly as if they were touching it. It's about creating a profound, tangible connection.
Which leaves us with a final, provocative thought to chew on the next time you head to the theater. Will the modern studio machine finally realize that endless post-production manipulation is completely destroying the soul of the medium? Will filmmaking return to crafting tactile, deeply intentional worlds that actually respect our perceptual reality? Or are we just doomed to remain trapped, quietly watching a blurry, flat simulation? It's absolutely crucial for the future of the art form, and definitely something worth keeping your eyes and your senses open to. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep exploring the incredible world of cinematic form.